Well, hey, everybody. Good morning. Good to see you. Glad that you're here. Those of you who are with us here in this room in Kirkland. And for everybody who's joining us online, we're so glad that you are with us as well. If it's your first time or maybe your first time in a while, we're in this series that we're calling 5 Ways to Wreck Your Life. Because, and you all know this, people have the surprising ability to make a mess of their lives, don't they? Maybe you've experienced that in your own life based on your choices or something that you've done. Maybe you're walking with someone or there's someone you know who's going through a season like that. And by the way, it can happen to anyone. It can happen to you. It can happen to me. Every person is one choice away from an absolute mess. But here's the good news. There is a way to wreck-proof your life. And the even better news is it doesn't have to do with your income or your occupation or your relationship status. It has to do with having this, wisdom. And if you've been part of the series, we've been defining wisdom in this kind of simple way. Wisdom is skill in living. It's knowing how to actually live a good life. And just so you know, there's a huge difference between skill in living or knowing how to live and having lots of information about life. You know this, we are probably the most overly informed society or generation that's ever walked the earth. Just this past week, I read that in the year 2020, the total amount of information or data on the internet reached 40 zettabytes, which you don't know that's 40 trillion gigabytes, which is that many bytes. I don't even know how to pronounce that number. It's that many. And just to give you a little context on this, to download this much information today would take 400 million years to download, and even longer if you have cable. So I'm just kidding. No, I'm just teasing on that. Information doesn't protect you from wrecking your life. Because information, as you know, we can have lots of information. And it's interesting, it hasn't led in our world to greater levels of happiness or health. It hasn't led to more lasting marriages or better families. It hasn't put a stop to wars or poverty or violence or discrimination, because there is a huge difference between being informed and being wise. Information's a really, really good thing. You need information. But information, again, doesn't protect you from wrecking your life, but wisdom can. Wisdom does. So we're taking this month to really dive into the value and the roots of wisdom by walking through this amazing little book in the Bible called Proverbs. It's a collection of about 900 Holy Spirit-inspired and time-tested truths on how to gain wisdom in life. And it's a really practical book. Like if you're someone who's not sure about the Bible, or if you can understand the Bible, or you need a lot of context for the Bible, you can go to this book, and it's very practical and straightforward, covering topics like money and friendship and sex and marriage and work and decision-making, all sorts of things that not only have guided followers of Jesus for centuries, but many of these proverbs have been known and used outside of religious context. Sayings like, pride goeth before the fall. And many of you have heard that one. Or as a dog returns to its own vomit. Kind of graphic, but it's in the Bible. Or this one, don't bite the hand that feeds you. Okay, that one's not actually in the Bible. But I have little kids, so I'm actually saying that one like it is in the Bible all the time in our house. All that's to say, the wisdom of this book has been used and applied for generations in and outside the church. And so we've picked 5 themes that kind of come up over and over, like friendship, money, decision-making, 5 themes that happen in this book, just to kind of dive into together. And we're also taking this month to read through this book. There's 31 chapters in Proverbs, so we got 31 days to read a chapter a day. And since today is July 10th, you should all be reading Proverbs chapter. Not supposed to be a trick question. Yep, Tim, that's right. And that's where I want to get us started as well. So if you have a Bible or a Bible app on your phone, turn to Proverbs chapter 10, starting in verse 11. We're going to kind of jump around a little bit and see if you can guess what we're going to kind of dive into today as I read these verses. Proverbs 10 says, the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. The wise store up knowledge, but the mouth of a fool invites ruin. Whoever conceals hatred with lying lips and spreads slander is a fool. Sin is not ended by multiplying words, but the prudent hold their tongues. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver, but the heart of the wicked is of little value. The lips of the righteous nourish many, but fools die for lack of sense. The lips of the righteous know what finds favor, but the mouth of the wicked only what is perverse. So any guesses on what we're talking about today? Mouths and tongues and lips, oh my, right? That kind of stuff. It's actually the way the Bible talks about our words, what we say, how we talk to one another, how we talk about one another, what we post about one another. Some of you may remember that old schoolyard saying, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," which is kind of an ironic thing to say because the only reason a kid would need to say those words was because they had been hurt by somebody else's, right? Words, you see, have this incredible power in our life. Incredible power. And we use them all the time, don't we? It's been estimated that the average person will speak over 860 million words in their lifetime. And those words will shape so much of what happens in their life, the course of their life in so many ways. You use words to make friends. You use words to get through school. You use words to get a job. You use words to ask out that special someone on that first date, right? I will never forget the first time I asked Nina, I used the words, I asked her if I could kiss her. Those were scary words to say, but she used this amazing word in response. She said yes. It was like 6 months after we got married, but she said yes, okay? She finally was all right with that. And this power in what we say isn't like a random accident of nature. This is something that God has entrusted to the human race, a unique gift that human beings have. And it's given by the God who used words to actually create the universe. If you know the creation story, the most common phrase in the story of creation is, "And God said." And those words actually had this life-giving, world-shaping, earth-forming power in the world. God's words created all that is good in the world. And then think about it this way. It's words that tore it all down. The serpent used words to tempt the woman. The woman used words to deceive the man. The man used words to blame the woman. And men, we've been doing that ever since, haven't we? It's amazing to think about how much of life is shaped by what we say, for better and for worse. In Proverbs 18, the writer puts it this way: the tongue or words have the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Which means words can bless your life or wreck your life. They can be the source of great joy or ultimate regret. So for the rest of my time with you today, I just want to walk through kind of 4 kinds or categories of words that can wreck your life and always will lead to some kind of regret. So 4 categories, 4 kinds, starting with this category. We'll all know this one: words of anger, words said in anger or contempt or hate or even fury. Now, before we dive into this doesn't mean that you can't ever feel angry at someone or angry about something. This doesn't mean that you can't ever express frustration or complaints with other people. It means in those moments when you have those feelings, we need to learn to be wise and careful with the words that we choose. Proverbs 12:18 puts it this way. It says, "The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." And then Proverbs 29 says, "Fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end." And some of you know all about this because you've lived through it. You've experienced life with someone who was reckless with their words or harsh with their words or gave full vent to their rage. Maybe it was a parent who was always angry or verbally disappointed. Maybe it was a spouse who belittled you or criticized you. Maybe it was someone at school or at work who bullied you or dismissed you or made fun of you. I was recently reading the story of a woman who struggled in her early years of life to learn to read as a child. And one of her classmates, when she was young, looked her in the eye and said, "You're so stupid." And those words broke into that deep part of her heart and her soul, and she couldn't let go. She lived under the burden, under the identity of that phrase for years in her life. Some of my own kind of biggest regrets have been words that I've said to Nina in the heat of an argument or an anger, sometimes knowing how much they would hurt. And even though in those moments it feels like I'm just reacting, it feels like I don't have a choice with what I say, the truth is I do have a choice. Because here's the thing, friends, your words are always a choice. Your feelings aren't a choice. Or the feeling or your pain or your hurt may not be a choice, but your words are actually always a choice. This is the Message translation of Proverbs 18:21. It says, words kill, words give life. They're either poison or fruit. Get this, you choose. You pick. Not whether you're upset, not whether you feel disappointed, not whether you're rightfully hurt by what someone said or did to you, but you choose the words that you'll say in response. And here's the thing about words of anger. Even though in the moment it feels like it can release so much frustration and we get a little boost of feeling better in the moment, words of anger or contempt never heal. They never heal. In fact, they actually deepen the fracture or divide that we're experiencing. But on the other hand, words of encouragement or love or empathy or understanding have this amazing power to heal and restore, of course. One of my favorite pictures of this comes from the research and work of a researcher named Dr. John Gottman. Many of you know his books or his writing. He's a kind of a leading expert on marriage and relational health. And some years ago, his team studied how different couples would work through conflict. Like what did they do when they were angry and in conflict? And they followed those couples for 9 years. And they discovered that the couples that stayed together, didn't get a divorce, the ones that stayed together didn't actually have more in common or less conflict than the couples who got divorced. The secret to their success was they had learned to use their words differently. In fact, they found that the couples who stayed together would have at least 5 positive words or interactions for every 1 negative word or interaction. A 5-to-1 ratio, positive to negative, just in all of their interactions, in all of their conversations, in all of their conflict. And this ratio was so prevalent. It was so prevalent and it was so predictive of how a couple's relationship would go that Dr. Gottman's team has been able to use it to predict whether or not a couple would stay married with over 90% accuracy just by watching how they use their words. Think about that. And by the way, I think some of us could use some work on this ratio as well, right? For so many of us, it's like 5 negative to 1 positive. Because you don't know how much that bothered me or hurt me or annoyed me. And I got to get all those things out before I'm ever going to get this one word on the table. And what happens is we become the kind of people who are quick to criticize or condemn or speak negatively or let our anger come out. But those things don't heal. And guess what? When you're 5-to-1 negative, what's this person going to start doing with their life? They're going to go 5-to-1 negative with the next person and the next person. And the fruit of that is the world in which we live, where so much of the words that you see and hear are words of anger and contempt. But they always break things down. They always actually wreck relationships. And Proverbs says that a wise person understands this and applies it. So that's one category, words of anger. Here's a second category for you. Words of slander, or words, if you will, of gossip. Words of slander or gossip. Proverbs 10:18 puts it this way: whoever conceals hatred with lying lips and spreads slander is a fool. And by the way, a fool in the book of Proverbs isn't someone who doesn't act right or look right or is kind of goofy or something like that, the way we might think of something that's foolish. A fool is anyone whose life is set on a course to wreck. It's anyone who's on a path to wreck their life. That's the fool. And the psalmist is saying, if you spread slander, you're on a path to wreck your life. And yet we all do this, don't we? We do this all the time. Like we wait until that person leaves the room and then we start talking critically about them. Or someone hurts our feelings and we don't go talk to them directly, we talk to everybody else about them. Why? Because it's easier to embellish the details or kind of get people on our side or have them believe our side of the story. But this ends up being incredibly painful and destructive. I mean, just think for a moment in your own life how it feels when you find out that someone's been speaking negatively about you when you're not in the room. It hurts, right? It makes it almost impossible to look at that person and trust that person or like that person. I remember at my last church going through a performance review process and finding out there were all these people on our staff that had all this negative feedback about me, but no one had ever told me directly. And it was so painful. And the pain wasn't the feedback they had. The pain was they had been talking to each other about it and not to me. Which is why in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says, and you've heard these words many times, if a brother or sister sins, go and point out the fault, what? Just between the two of you. And Jesus means, it's real simple. He means go in person to the person and to just that person. This is the rule. This is the way. This is the path of wisdom right here. In person to the person and to just that person. In fact, the only exception to the rule, if you will, is if you fear, retaliation at work or a threat to your safety in a relationship. Otherwise, in person, to the person, and to just that person. And by the way, a little thought experiment. Just imagine how boring social media might be if we chose to live this way. Like there'd be nothing left in your feed. Imagine how much less there would be to say or listen to on cable news or talk radio if the rule was you can't speak poorly about somebody who's not in the room. Maybe we could start having some real conversations again. Maybe we could start treating each other like human beings again, made in God's image, worthy of dignity and respect. I mean, think about it. God never said you have to always agree with your neighbor, but he did say you shall not bear false witness or slander your neighbor, because words of slander destroy the possibility of trust. And a wise person understands this and applies it. This leads to a third category of words that will wreck your life, and they are words of deceit. Words of deceit or manipulation or spin, or half-truths. Some years ago, some friends of mine bought a new sofa for their home. It was a mauve-colored sofa, which is just a fancy way of saying it was pink. And when they bought it, the salesman said, hey, do you have kids in your house? I said, yes, we've got 3 little kids in our house. And so he actually tried to talk them out of buying this mauve sofa. He said, you might want to get something that's more dirt or stain color, because that's probably what's going to happen to your couch when you have it in your home. But my friend's wife was set on the sofa. She said, this is our sofa, our forever sofa, our mauve sofa. So they bought it, took it home. Now, any guesses on what the most important rule in the house was from that point on, right? Don't sit on the mauve sofa. Don't play on the mauve sofa. Don't even get too close to the mauve sofa. It was like the forbidden tree in the Garden of Eden. If you even touch it, you shall surely die, okay? And then one morning, they woke up and there was a bright red stain on that sofa. And everybody got quiet in the room just like that. And my friend's wife actually lined up her children in front of the sofa, like interrogation time with the kids. The oldest was 4, the second 2.5, the youngest was 6 months old, right? Lined up in front of the couch. And she asked them, do you see the stain on that couch? I tried cleaning it and it didn't come out. I called the salesman. He said, it's never coming out, not forever. Children, do you know how long forever is? It's how long we're standing here until someone confesses the truth of what happened to our mauve sofa. But no one said a word, including my good friend who just hours earlier had a big jelly donut on that sofa, by the way. Until eventually he broke down, but he didn't really confess. He said, it was the donut's fault. It was improperly filled. And it was the kids' fault. They were distracting me because they're children. And mostly it was the sofa's fault, because who buys a mauve sofa, okay? Here's the point of that story. And this is so true to how we live. So many words and so little truth. So many words about why it's not my fault, or here's what happened, or here's what went around that, and so little, here's what I did, and I'm sorry. Remember those words from Proverbs 10. Sin is not ended by multiplying words. What a profound phrase. Sin can't be fixed by you talking more about it or talking around it or adding extra context or just working your way around of speaking the truth. And by the way, partial truths don't count either. I can remember not long ago, Nina asking me a question, and I told her half the answer. It was true, it was only half the answer. And when she found out the rest, it was still hurtful because you can't build trust with half truths or manipulative words or spin or deceit. I love Proverbs 24:26, which says, an honest answer is like a kiss on the lips. You want to build trust with someone? You want to build intimacy with someone? You want to bridge the gap with someone? Tell the truth. Don't spin. Don't deceive. No half-truths. Honesty is as intimate as kissing. So just to review, the kind of words that can wreck your life: words of anger, words of slander, words of deceit. And here's the deal. We all fall into this all the time, me included. So no exceptions are in the room right now. There's no exceptions watching online right now. Here's the thing. Wise people make a commitment to learn to not use them. I mean, fools just let them rip, let it go, and they wonder why no one likes them or no one trusts them or no one respects them. But the wise, by God's grace, can actually learn to use their words differently. We can learn to use words of love instead of hate, words of encouragement instead of gossip, words of affirmation instead of words of criticism. And here's the thing, you can too. Like, God can help you do this. God wants to have your words have the same life-giving, grace-giving effect that his words have. And I hope this week you'll start a simple commitment to work on not just what you have to do or decide, but to take some time and work on what you say. So what would it look like in your life this week to just take a moment in the beginning of your day or sometime in your day when you're going to pause and reflect and say, God, how can I work on what I have to say and how I say it? What words of anger or deceit or slander am I falling into? And God, help me course correct from being a fool to being wise with my words. What would that look like for you this week? And as you're thinking about that, before I close, I got to address one more category of words that can wreck your life. And it's not the words that you say, it's simply the words that you don't say. Did you know that the greatest regrets in your life probably won't be the things that you said, but things that you didn't say? Words like, I love you, when you needed to say, I love you. Or, I'm sorry, when you could or should have said, I'm sorry. Or I forgive you when you could or should have said, I forgive you. Proverbs 10:21 makes this very point. He writes, the lips of the righteous nourish many. Those words are so important. Words matter, but fools die for a lack of sense. Lack of sense about what? About the fact that what you don't say can sting just as much as what you do say. This past week, I was getting up early and getting some stuff done around the house, and our 2-year-old son, Jude, woke up and was calling out from his room, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. And because I was busy, Nina was in our bedroom. She said, just bring him to me, I'll take him, and so I did. But I was in such a rush that when I picked him up out of his crib, I didn't say, good morning, buddy, or how you doing, or how'd you sleep, or I love you. I just picked him up and took him to Nina and went back to what I was doing. And after I left, he looked at her and said, Daddy mad? Daddy mad? I know it's terrible, right? Like, I'm a terrible father. I get it. I'm just confessing in front of everybody. It's a terrible dad moment. But here's the thing. He assumed my silence was anger or disappointment or frustration. Without my words, he felt scared and alone. That's how powerful and painful unspoken words can be. And we've all been there too in moments where there was an unspoken word that was needed. A word of love or encouragement, a reminder that you belong, a word from a friend or a family or a loved one, but all you got was silence. And I think sometimes our deepest question about God is that silence. Some of us are living right now in that posture of that little 2-year-old saying, Daddy mad, Daddy mad. And that's where Jesus comes in. Because Jesus was a master with his words. He never once uttered a word of hate or contempt. Even when he was baited into an argument or a fight, he would remain silent or maybe draw on the sand. He'd do something as to say, I'm not playing that game. He never spoke a word of gossip or slander. He never went to John and said, John, can you believe Peter sank down in the water? He didn't have faith. He just sank in the water. Can you believe that guy? How can he do that? He never spoke a word of deceit, not even when it could have saved his life. When Pilate said, are you actually the king of the Jews? And Jesus could have spun that around and saved his own life. He said, no, it is just as you say, and it cost him his life. But when he spoke, his words always gave peace and life and healing and hope, which means the best way to learn to be wise with your words is to learn from Jesus. To watch what he said, how he said it, when he spoke, when he was silent. And he never had to have the last word in an argument because the cross was the last word. And when he was on that cross, he didn't say, Father, curse them. He said, Father, forgive them. Anyone else need to hear those words today? And he didn't say, well, we'll see if this whole redemption thing works. He said, it is finished. Sin, death, darkness, you're done. Anyone else need to hear those words today? And for all of you who think you're not sure about God or that God's been silent in your life, for those of you who are wondering, daddy mad, daddy mad, daddy mad, Jesus is what God would want to say to you. He is the Word of God made flesh. He is God's voice with skin on. He is everything God's ever wanted to say to you. And he's made his position on your life clear. I love you. I'm with you. I'm for you. And he's asking you right now to trust him. So here's my question. What word will you say in response to that question? What word will you have in response? Story I want to share to you today of a man in our church named Mike. And I got to hear a little bit of his story a couple of weeks ago, and I was so moved by it that we asked him to share his story with you today. It's a story of God stepping in and speaking into his life, and of Mike hearing those words, calling him back to God. So take a look at this video right now.
My name is Mike, and I'm getting baptized today. My mom and dad divorced when I was, younger, and mom really wasn't and still isn't really, spiritual. She believes in God and stuff, but my dad has kind of always been like that. Growing up, I kind of started veering away from the whole organized religion thing. During that season of my life, I was just kind of getting really into, the whole drinking a lot and, smoking a lot of weed and stuff like that. And just kind of felt like just kind of going through the motions and kind of going through life. I came for the Easter service here. So I was like, kind of going through the motions and stuff. And then about a week after that, I fainted and lost consciousness for around 20-ish minutes. And then I woke up and, I just heard this voice, while I was kind of, hey, get up, you need to start making some changes. And I do kind of feel like it was, God telling me, hey, you need to make a way back. So then I did come back to, church the following week. And the sermon that week just kind of was probably honestly the best sermon I've ever heard in my life. I kind of honestly started tearing up and crying. I was talking about conquering your giants in your life. At that point, with my medical stuff, I was very fearful, and it's kind of, hey, I'm not the only person that, has giants in their life, and kind of felt like, it was God talking to me again. And, I've been dealing with some anxiety lately too, just because of this whole thing. And, I did recently, about 2 months ago, stop smoking cigarettes, stop smoking weed and stuff like that. And I feel like that was kind of masking my anxiety too. I've been finding ways to, pray and kind of help. I've been working with doctors and stuff like that too, So I just kind of want to put, like I said, my past, behind me. And I know I just kind of want to kind of take that next, I feel like it's the next leap of faith, I guess, and kind of start, new with God and Jesus, and just kind of be on that new path that I'm wanting. And just becoming a better Mike.
One of the great things about this morning, what you're about to experience, is not just that you got to hear Mike share some of the story, but Mike's getting baptized this morning. And He, along with some other people who've discovered that the secret, the heart of wisdom is simply saying yes to Jesus. In fact, the only way to not wreck your life in this life is to say yes to Jesus. The only way. It's the only way. And so we're gonna do something a little different this morning before we jump back in and sing and worship, and before we jump out and do Summer Blues outside. I'm gonna give each of you a chance to respond to Jesus and say yes to him, maybe for the first time in a long time, by actually coming forward and being baptized this morning. Now, some of you are thinking, well, Scotty, we came to see you get dunked outside. That's not for us. That's gonna be a little bit later outside, so come back for that. But this is your moment. Maybe you felt far from God. Maybe you have questions about if he's real, if he's there. Maybe you feel like you're carrying around a burden of regret or shame or guilt, or maybe you just feel so overwhelmed, or at the end of your rope, you're not sure what to do. Well, let me clarify God's position on your life. God's word to you right now is, yes, I'm real. And yes, I'm with you. And yes, I love you. And yes, I forgive you. In fact, the Apostle Paul once wrote that all of God's promises are yes in Jesus. That's what he thinks about you. The question is, how will you respond to his yes? It's really, with Jesus, it's kind of a yes or no thing. It's either, yes, Jesus, I want to surrender and trust you with my life. Or no, I feel like I should just kind of keep doing it on my own. But you have to choose. You have to choose what word you'll say. And your eternity depends on that choice. So here's what I'm gonna do. I wanna invite you, if you're able, to please stand. So everybody stand, if you're able. And in a moment, I'm gonna count down from 3. I'm gonna invite you to come forward and be baptized right over here. There's a sign that says, I have decided. I'll be over there to say hi, to give you a high five and say, way to go. And we got a team in the back who can answer questions. And by the way, it doesn't matter what clothes you're wearing. We've got shorts, t-shirts, towels, private changing areas. Doesn't matter what's happened in your past or your background. This is about you today taking a stand in God's grace and saying yes to the God who said yes to you. And if you're feeling a little nervous, like what will people think, or I'm here with my friends or family, put the fears aside. Jesus gave his life for this moment in your life, and you have a chance right now to respond and say yes. So are you ready? Are you ready? Here we go, on the count of 3. On the count of 3. You can come forward right over here, all right? 1, 2, this is a time for your yes. Here we go. 3, come on down.
Hey, thanks so much for watching.
Please be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.
Yep, and click right here for more content we think you might like.
Seriously,
Click it.
do it right now. Show them again, Kiki.